this is kind of ironic because in our Wednesday episode we had Ian Carroll on, and he talked about some of the behind the scenes goings on at the Daily Wire, and we bashed the organization a little bit. But actually today I'm gonna say some good stuff about the Daily Wire because they have actually done good work on this subject. Wednesday, the Supreme Court had a hearing to review whether Tennessee is allowed to ban gender transition surgeries and treatments for underage children. The case is U.S. v. Skermeti, which is brought by the Biden DOJ and the American Civil Liberties Union against Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skermeti. This whole thing dates back to 2023, when Tennessee Governor Bill Lee signed Senate Bill 1 into law in March, which took effect in July. The bill bans doctors or healthcare providers from performing so-called gender-affirming surgeries or hormonal procedures on minors, including surgery, puberty blockers, and hormones.
And the Biden administration wants them to be able to do it?
Yes. We have a couple pictures of what it's been like outside the Supreme Court while this is going on.
Weird. Look at that.
Huge rallies for transing kids, against transing kids.
Demons. Those are all demons.
And
with
paid,
rainbows in
I
their
think
hand.
paid too, to be honest.
Yeah, no shit.
That one up at the top right is the anti-trans movement.
Good.
Just stop transing gay kids. But
Nice.
That's what's happening. Is your boy a little bit effeminate and interested in boys? He's not actually a girl. He might just be
Dude,
gay.
I was such a tomboy growing up. I did not play with Barbies. I played with dinosaurs and dragons.
Nice.
Okay, I had guy friends and we ran around the playground playing Harry Potter. If I was born in today's age, I'm not even kidding, I probably would have come out as Adam. Not even kidding.
And what's crazy is my wife's sister is the tomboy of her family, and she's a lesbian. Yeah. If she was born 10 years later, they would have tried to transition.
Yeah.
Yep.
And she has said, I've always felt like I was different on the inside, but not like a man. I just knew I didn't like the normal girly things.
Right.
You tell that to a pediatrician or a therapist today, and guess what? They're signing you up for this genital mutilation.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's crazy. And there's unlimited stories like
Amy,
that from both sides.
Not to divert, but I just pictured really quick, you playing with dinosaurs, only fans. Anyway. Just Amy, just you going, rah, rah, but you have to be just in a bikini. Nothing naked, you're a Christian. You're a Christian, don't be that girl.
Yeah. But that Tennessee bill that was signed into law actually originated with Matt Walsh's investigation into the Vanderbilt University Medical Center in September 2022. Good. During that investigation, they found this video, among many others, where they found that the hospital was talking about how gender procedures were, quote, big money makers, and they pressured employees to ignore their religious beliefs on transgender issues or else face consequences. Let's roll that clip real quick.
Starting in January 1st of 2017, according to the Affordable Care Act, insurance carriers are mandated to cover medical expenses for trans folks. Some of our VUMC financial folks in October of 2016, starting a couple of years ago, put down some costs of how much money we think each patient would bring in. And this is only including top surgery. This isn't including any bottom surgery. And it's a lot of money. These surgeries make a lot of money. So female to male chest reconstruction can bring in $40,000. A patient just on routine hormone treatment, who I'm only seeing a few times a year, can bring in several $1,000 because that requires a lot of visits and labs. It actually makes money for the hospital. Now these I got from the internet, but it's from the Philadelphia Center for Transgender Surgery, which does a lot of surgery for patients. And I just want to give you an idea of how much these bottom surgeries are making. And I think this has to be an underestimate. This is for a vaginoplasty. They're quoting roughly around $20,000 for a vaginoplasty, but that doesn't include your hospital stay. That doesn't include your post-op visits. That doesn't include your anesthesia, your OR. So I would think that this has to be a gross underestimate. I think that's just like the surgeon's piece of it, which anybody who's ever been in the hospital knows that that's like 10% of it. And then the female to male bottom surgeries, these are huge money makers. Again, I think this has to be an underestimate that they're quoting around $20,000 for a phalloplasty. There's been different things that I've read that said it could be up to $100,000. Dr. Winokur, who's our surgeon, says that there's entire clinics where the entire clinic is supported just by their phalloplasties, and that is like a fraction of the surgeries that they're doing. These surgeries are labor intensive, they require a lot of follow-ups, they require a lot of OR time, and they make money.
Yeah, because you're chopping off your penis. They're chopping off your penis and constructing a fake vagina. The infections, the problems. Bro, this is big business, and every single doctor, physician, that are pro this because of the money. I pray that dude, they better find Jesus as soon as possible, because what you're doing to these kids is not only unholy, it's disgusting, and it's an abomination, and you're ruining this kid's life. You're ruining their life. And the parents that are like, oh, you feel like a boy? Chop it off. Dude, this drives me freaking crazy.
What's so insane about this as well, like, because I've studied a lot of like detransitioner stories. They're heartbreaking. Like, I've literally been moved to tears hearing some of these people's stories. But you know, when they start you on this trajectory at a very young age, not only do they make a lot of money from the surgeries, but you're also signing up to be a lifelong medical patient from the hormones, the cross-sex hormones, and initially the puberty blockers that they give you. Now, when they give you these puberty blockers when you're very young and you don't actually end up going through puberty, what's crazy for the people who are actually really trans and weren't just manipulated into believing that they're trans is when they get old enough to actually do the surgery and turn the P into a vagina.
Yeah.
It hasn't developed enough because they never went through surgery, so they can't even get the friggin' at the end of the tunnel anyways. Sorry, it's so backward. None of it makes any sense whatsoever, that if they actually want to help these people transition in the long run, you're actually inhibiting them from doing that by preventing them from going through puberty, because that part can't develop enough to turn it into what they would want it to turn into.
When you hear that woman going through that whole list of how much money they make off these things, the Supreme Court hearing is about kids, like trying to make it so you can't do this to anyone under 18. This is a horrible, evil thing to do to anybody over the age of 18 too. That's just not what they're talking about right now. Because if you look into what these procedures actually are, there's a reason why you sign up to be a lifelong medical patient, because this is a barbaric Frankensteinian operation of, oh, are you a man who wants to become a woman? Great, we'll cut your penis off, put it inside out, jam it up the gaping hole we just made, and then pretend like we made you a vagina. Oh, are you a woman who wants one? Well, guess what? We're going to rip all the flesh off your forearm, roll it into a ball, and just kind of staple it on there and see what happens.
That's literally what they do. It's
And the vagina doesn't work. The penis doesn't work. These are non-functional masses of decaying flesh that are stapled onto things.
Never have an orgasm again for the rest of your life in both cases with either transition. And that's what people like. Oftentimes they don't even know what they're signing up for when they go through this. And that's why Buck Angel never went through with the surgery. That's why Blair White actually never went through with the surgery either. And these are two people who actually speak out and try to inform the LGBT community of all of the inherent risks that come with going through the procedure.
And when you mentioned they're just chunks of flesh, have you ever heard what men who have the surgery to become women have to do to their new vagina?
Your body thinks it's an open wound that it constantly tries to heal.
Yes.
So you shove a medical grade dildo into an open wound to try to keep it open.
Called
every day.
dilation.
Yeah,
so these women, or these now new women, or whatever you want to call them, they then have to take this medical device and they have to continue to insert it into their new man-made vagina to continue to keep it from sealing up and doing what the body naturally does. So your body is naturally telling you that this is unnatural what you're doing to it, and you're ignoring that for what?
Except
to be part of a crowd?
When it seals up like that, it creates an air pocket inside your body. You get sepsis and die within a couple of weeks.
Well, if that's what you want as an adult, go for it. Nobody's stopping you. I don't know why you would think like that, but do it. But the fact that we're talking about Supreme Court has to get involved with Joe Biden's administration, these freaking satanic demon sons of bitches. I'm sorry I had to say it. Like, what are we even talking about? Why? What is the obsession with children? And I mean, I know it. I get it. The money, the depopulation thing, because there's too many of us. But oh my God, bro, their souls. If you have anything to do with any of this whole procedure, any of it, and you're talking positive about it, God help your soul. Seriously.
But like I said, this whole thing got started in Tennessee because of Matt Walsh's report there. We have this New York Post article where a member of the Republican Tennessee State Senate actually cited that report in why they backed the bill. Jack Johnson, the Republican Tennessee State Senate Majority Leader, told the New York Post that Matt Walsh's investigation into Vanderbilt University Medical Center giving puberty blockers and hormones to children was the reason the state legislature passed a bill banning the life-altering procedures on minors. There's the report there. So this whole thing was implemented in 2023, and it's been challenged, like we said, by the Biden DOJ and the American Civil Liberties Union, who are trying to argue that it's a question of rights, according to them. The ACLU sued in April 2023, claiming trans procedures were, quote, medically necessary gender-affirming care for Tennessee's transgender youth to prevent suicides. This is their main line of, okay, if you don't affirm a trans kid, they're going to kill themselves.
You want a living daughter or a dead son?
Yeah.
Or vice
Of course,
versa.
Yeah.
to say nothing of the countless studies that show that suicidality actually goes up after these procedures.
Right.
When you look at the ruined remains of your body as you're constantly hooked on like 18 different kinds of medication in order just to survive now,
Yeah.
and you realize you made a mistake and these kids will kill themselves.
And they ignore and silence the detransitioners.
Exactly. They actively threaten them into not speaking out about this.
Many people who suffer from like real gender dysphoria as well, like they have other pre-existing mental health conditions as well that are extremely taxing on their well-being and their mental health. So oftentimes the reason they're unaliving themselves is not because of the gender dysphoria, it's because of all of the other mental illnesses that they have as well.
Right.
So on this next slide here, we have the two sides of the argument. On the left is Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti, who is being sued by all these organizations. On the right is Chase Strangio, who is
Very strange.
who is the lawyer arguing the case before the Supreme Court on behalf of the ACLU. That is a woman who identifies as a transgender man.
Oh my God!
I mean,
Which-
really?
Good
Yeah.
for you, Chase. Looking all strange.
The ACLU has advertised that Strangio will be the first openly trans-identifying individual to argue a case before the Supreme Court, describing her as our nation's leading legal expert on the rights of transgender people, bar none.
Wait. So that
is a woman.
But does she want you to call him a she?
No.
He wants to be called a dude.
That is a woman who identifies as a man.
Okay, so he wants you to call him as a guy. He's
Chase.
a
Yes.
guy.
Strangio.
Yes. But, I don't respect arbitrary selected pronouns.
No, they become it.
Yeah, I acknowledge biological reality, so that's a woman regardless of what she's done to her face and body.
Yeah.
It's tragic, and honestly, she's as much of a victim of it as anyone else. But this whole thing has kind of become the victim abuser spiral, because you have sympathy when you're a victim, but as soon as you start victimizing others, that sympathy kind of goes out the window. If we can go to the next slide, we have a segment of the speech Matt Walsh gave outside the Supreme Court. I want to give credit where credit is due here, so I want him to kind of articulate his position on it. We can roll a few minutes of this if you want.
Go ahead.
All right, great. Thank you, guys. We are all here on this cold day because we recognize three very basic truths. First, that biology is real. It is immutable. It is not subject to the whims of any individual or government or medical organization. Men are men, women are women. That's all there is to it. You cannot change a person's biological identity. You cannot change their sex, and you should not try. Second, that the most essential and fundamental duty of any society is to protect their children. A country that cannot or will not protect its children is a country that deserves to die and will. Children are innocent and helpless. They know very little about themselves, very little about the world around them. They rely on us for clarity and guidance and protection. They trust us, the adults, implicitly. So when they're confused and scared, they look to us to be the ones who light the way and lead them down the right and safe path. It is our moral obligation to be the source of wisdom and security that they need and that they deserve. If we will not fulfill that obligation, then we are worse than useless. The third truth is this, that gender ideology, the radical leftist doctrine that claims that girls can be boys and boys can be girls, and that such a impossible transition can be made possible through irreversible drugs and surgery, Gender ideology is deeply sinister. It is a unique threat to children in particular. It is one of the greatest and most incomprehensible evils ever visited upon children in the whole history of the human race. These are the truths that bring us to this spot on this day, that biology is a fact, that we have a duty to protect our children, that the trans agenda denies the fact of biology and is a distinct threat to our children. We affirm these truths. We call on the Supreme Court to affirm them too.
How much longer is it?
Now, the other side claims
we can cut it there.
that this is a...
So that's basically the crux of the argument. That
I love it.
It's one side is standing for biological reality, the other side is standing for the mutilation of children. There are certain issues that arise in politics where if you try to make an argument on behalf of that, it is openly evil. Where it's not just two conflicting opinions, it's good versus evil. This is one of those. That was what was happening outside the court. I'd like to take us inside the court now, if we can. Here's some quick segments of the oral arguments. Speaking of, as Matt Walsh said, immutable characteristics. This first one might be a little bit difficult to hear because the quality of the audio isn't fantastic on how they're releasing these things. But this is Justice Alito questioning the attorneys on whether gender is an immutable characteristic.
Category of does transgender status apply to individuals who are gender fluid?
I think that the distinguishing characteristic is to have a birth sex that does not align with, or a gender that does not align with one's birth sex. So it may include people who have different understandings of their gender identity, but I think it is still the distinguishing characteristic of a birth sex and a gender identity that are incongruent.
Are there individuals who are born male, assigned male at birth, who at one point identify as female, but then later come to identify as male, and likewise for individuals who are assigned female at birth, at some point identify as female, identify as male, but later come to identify as female? Are there not such people?
There are such people. I agree with that, Justice.
So it's not an immutable characteristic, is it?
Well, I think people's understanding of it shifts, but the evidence shows that there is at least a strong underlying basis. And I think the normative reason for that particular consideration is whether or not this is something that someone should or could change, and whether they should have to change it in order to receive constitutional protections. And I think transgender status squarely fits within that.
And I want to break down what we just heard there because it's really important. This whole case is being argued as if it's a civil rights issue. Of you can't discriminate against people. They have a right to transition. They have a right to have care that affirms their gender identity. But what Alito said is, and made them clearly admit, is that gender can change. Constitutional civil rights protections are for immutable characteristics. That is, race. It was supposed to be sex of male, female, because at that point it was considered immutable. Things you can't change. You cannot discriminate against people for things they cannot change. But if you can change your gender, that means gender's not an immutable characteristic and therefore should not be protected.
Wow.
And he made them admit that. But of course they're trying to argue, no, because it's not just that they're changing, it's that they always were this. And we're just making their bodies represent that. But it's an incoherent argument. Any thoughts on that real quick? Because
it's incoherent because of the detransitioners, and that's proof enough, which is why he said, but is it true that they could then change back? I mean, that's proving it's not immutable. Like, this whole thing about, like, being born in the wrong body is just so freaking ludicrous. Like, the fact that people actually believe this is insane.
Well, they're trained.
It seems like you make them believe anything today, though. But I mean, it's a really, like, unhuman and ungodly thing. I mean, it's the whole transhumanism thing. Like, they're trying to detach the soul from the body and make it like your body's not like a real core part of who you are.
And that's the problem with the transgender argument is nobody's denying that someone who identifies as trans is experiencing a disharmony between their brain and their physical reality. The problem is that they're trying to say the solution is to change the physical reality to fit the brain, rather than addressing the problem with the brain in the first place.
The brain's the problem.
Oh, you're thinking something that doesn't match with reality? Great, we'll just change reality to match your diseased thoughts.
And is reality tilting you to think that way in the first place?
Exactly.
It's a reality society.
Yeah, it's
right.
insanely easy to tilt somebody to think certain things.
So this next clip is also of Alito, where he, again, basically makes the lawyers dismantle their own argument.
Is he Republican or Democrat?
Well, technically the Supreme Court's nonpartisan, but he's one of the conservative justices.
Got you.
True in every respect, but on page 195 of the Cass report, it says, there is no evidence that gender affirmative treatments reduce suicide.
What I think that is referring to is there is no evidence in the studies that this treatment reduces completed suicide. And the reason for that is completed suicide, thankfully and admittedly, is rare, and we're talking about a very small population of individuals with studies that don't necessarily have completed suicides within them. However, there are multiple studies, long-term longitudinal studies, that do show that there is a reduction in suicidality, which I think is a positive outcome to this treatment.
Let me ask a question about another issue that came up during Justice Kagan's questioning and Justice Barrett's question.
So that's the lawyer. Jay, can you show the lawyer? I want to hear him and see him talk. Did he lose his? Did he chop everything off?
I have no details on operation.
You don't know about the operation? Listen, look, Rob. If you saw this,
remember, that's a woman.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
Girl.
So yeah, do you think he added the clipped off meat from his forearm? This guy.
I mean, that would be easy to see if he wasn't wearing a long.
Look how weird. This doesn't make sense. Look.
Man, it sucks when a trans man is more attractive than I am.
Yeah.
Look at that. I mean, that's a better looking dude than I. Oh, it's a girl though. Well,
it's a girl that took pills and shots to get. Play this clip.
Say is nobody has to provide this medication.
Look,
These are not doctors being forced to provide this medication. These are doctors who are wanting to treat their patients in the best way that they know how, based on the best available evidence to us. And
he sounds like a gay dude, but that's a woman. That's a
she
freaking
sounds like
woman. You're a woman.
Amanda Bynes is a better job, and she's the man.
I know. 100%.
Yeah, but if we can jump to my last clip, this will show what's happening on the liberal side of the court.
Great. Chop it off.
Where it's essentially Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson, who are very pro.
Lop
trans.
off your crotch.
And Brown Jackson, who we recently found out talks like 2 times as much as any other justice on the Supreme Court. Make of that whatever you will. Yeah. This was her argument regarding this legislation.
In the same kinds of arguments that were made back in the day, 50s, 60s, with respect to racial classifications and inconsistencies. I'm thinking in particular about Loving, and I'm wondering whether you've thought about the parallels, because I see one, as to how this statute operates and how the anti-miscegenation statutes in Virginia operated.
Yes, and I think the court has recognized that the Equal Protection Clause was intended to force some changes in society and get us to think more closely about the way that people were being classified, including when that was based on overbroad generalizations of how we expect them to live and order their affairs. And the court has made that clear in the sex discrimination cases as well, where it said sometimes these laws operate to disadvantage someone who falls outside the average description, and that person needs the protection of the court.
Well, and the thing I thought what was most interesting about the potential comparison to Loving is that in that case, everyone seemed to concede up front that a racial classification was being drawn by the statute. That was sort of like the starting point. The question was whether it was discriminatory because it applied to both races and it wasn't, necessarily invidious or whatever. But, as I read the statute here, the case here, the court starts off by saying that Virginia is now one of 16 states which prohibit and punish marriages on the basis of racial classifications. And when you look at the structure of that law, it looks in terms of, you can't do something that is inconsistent with your own characteristics. It's sort of the same thing. So it's interesting to me that we now have this different argument, and I wonder whether Virginia could have gotten away with what they did here by just making a classification argument the way that Tennessee is in this case.
Yes, I think that's exactly right, that there is absolutely a parallel between any law that says you can't act inconsistent with a protected characteristic.
She's going to lose the argument.
Well, on that point, the Supreme Court is very much leaning towards upholding the Tennessee ban, which means it will set precedent for many other states to enact similar things. Hopefully one day we can even see a federal ban on gender transitions for minors.
Nice.
But that argument she made, she referenced Loving v. Virginia, which was a Supreme Court case that struck down bans on interracial marriages. It's like, oh, if you're doing something outside your category, you're not. The argument doesn't even make any sense. It's hard to articulate because you can't track the logic of, oh, if you don't let someone slice off your teenage son's penis, that's as bad as saying a black man and a white woman can't get married.
Yeah, that's how they always.
That's the same thing.
It always has to go back to race.
It's always racialized.
I found a list. I just wanted to give you, just to put this in perspective, things that you must be 18 years or older to do in the United States. If you're under the age of 18, you can't vote, you can't sign contracts, you can't serve on a jury, you can't sue or be sued, you can't be tried as an adult, you can't open a bank account, you can't apply for credit cards, you can't get a loan, you're not allowed to live independently, you can't get married, you can't buy a lottery ticket, you can't work full time, you can't drive a commercial vehicle, you can't rent a car, you can't make medical decisions. You can't make medical decisions. You can't have access to medical records. You can't join the military, run for public office, buy tobacco products, purchase firearms, enter casinos, attend certain events, buy mature content, adopt a child, be a notary public, that's a weird one, or get a hunting or fishing license, but you can mutilate your genitals if you have been brainwashed by the woke left to believe that the identity that you feel on the inside does not reflect the sex that you were born with. Help me make sense of that. You can't do any of those things if you're under the age of 18, but if you want to chop your dick off, go ahead.
Yep. Doesn't make any sense. And I said, bro, God help those people, because that's the only thing that can help them, bro. And the fact, and I pray that these kids, they start waking up and like bans like this start happening, especially at the Supreme Court level, and I hope it becomes federal.
The court is expected to have a ruling sometime next year. They'll take their time to deliberate and then have a break, and then they'll come back and issue a ruling. So hopefully we're on the verge of a precedent-setting ruling here that maybe helps us take a step in the right direction. Until then, prayers for everybody involved in that whole thing. Hats off to Tennessee, their Attorney General, the Daily Wire.
Yep.
Well done all around.
Hell yeah, Matt Walsh, shout out. So if you like this clip, click right here. And if you want to see more like it, click right here. Stay angry, Patriots.